This tutorial is for 4th grade Module 5, Lesson 32. In this lesson, we're going to look at patterns in pictures, input-output tables, and measurement conversions. In this first section, we're looking for patterns in a picture. When I work with pictures, sometimes it's helpful to shade in the difference between one picture to the next. Here I've shaded in the first picture in the pattern, and then I shaded in that portion of the second pattern. So you can see in the second picture in the pattern, we have 3 more squares that were added to the first shape. And with that same shading, I showed the 3 new squares added to the second picture and then copied that onto the third picture. So we started with 3 squares, then we took those 3 squares and added another 3 squares, and then we took those 3 squares, added another 3 squares, and then this time we added 4 squares. To figure out the next picture in the pattern, I'm going to start by copying the third picture. So we have a column with 4 squares, and then next to it a column with 3 squares, and then a column with 2 squares, and finally a column with 1 square. From there, I need to add 1 more square to each column, because if you look at the difference between the first pattern and the second pattern, we added a square on top of each column, and then we did the same thing in the third pattern. So let's add 1 more square to each column. And there's the next picture in our pattern. Here we're looking at input-output tables. What that means is we're going to take a number and do something to that number to get the output number. Here I have 1. I performed some sort of operation on it to get 6 as my output number. My first thought would be that I could be adding 5. Let's test out the second number to see if that holds true. If I put in 2 and add 5 to it and I get 7, that would be correct. Now, what would I put in to get 8 for an answer? Well, if I put in 3 and add 5 to it, I would get 8 for an answer. That means if I put in 4 and add 5 to it, I would get 9 for an answer. If we go down our columns, that seems to make sense because we can see a pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So my rule for my table is to add 5. In part B, the input is 3, the output is 0. It's possible that we could be subtracting 3. If I look at my column here, I've started 3, blank, 5, 6. It's reasonable to try 4 for my missing number. If I put in 4 and take away 3, that equals 1. If I put in 5 and take away 3, that equals 2. If I put in 6 and take away 3, that equals 3. And so my rule for that table is to subtract 3. In the last table, I'm putting in 1 and I'm getting 10. I could think of that as adding 9, but let's see what happens with that. If I put in 2 and add 9, I would get 11. If I put in 3 and add 9, I would get 12. Well, that doesn't match my answer here, so adding 9 is not the rule. So let's try something else. Well, if I put in 1 and multiply it by 10, I would have 10 for an output. If I put in 2 and multiply it by 10, I would have 20 for an output. If I put in 3 and multiply it by 10, I would get 30 for an output. And if I put 4 in and multiply it by 10, I would get 40 for an output. So that seems to be the rule for this one, that we're going to multiply by 10. Now we can think of our conversion tables as another form of an input-output table. Earlier in the module, we looked at the connection between feet and inches. In 1 foot, there are 12 inches. So if I have 2 feet, that means I would have 24 inches. In 4 feet, I would have 48 inches. In 6 feet, I would have 72 inches because 6 times 12 is 72. So I have to think, well, what number times 12 is 96? I can see a pattern forming here. Each time I'm adding 2. Here, I'm adding 24 each time. So that pattern must hold true on both sides. That means 8 feet is the same thing as 96 inches. And 8 times 12 is 96. So the rule is for every foot that I have in the first column, I would multiply that by 12 to tell me how many inches I have in the second column. In Table B, I'm looking at the connection between feet and yards. For every 1 yard I have, there are 3 feet. If I have 6 feet, that means I have 2 yards. If I have 9 feet, that would give me 3 yards. If I have 12 feet, well, 12 divided by 3 is 4, that would give me 4 yards. So this time, when I'm starting with my feet and going to my yards, I'm dividing by 3 each time to get the number of yards. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 6 divided by 3 is 2, 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that explains why we're dividing on this table instead of multiplying.